What if I told you that over 100 rock and roll legends have left us, yet their music still electrifies millions? From Jerry Lee Lewis setting pianos on fire to Bon Scott leading AC/DC with his wild voice. Here are 25 famous rock and roll stars you didn't know passed away. 1. Jerry Lee Lewis. A wild force at the piano, Jerry Lee Lewis didn't just play rock and roll, he made it explode. His fingers flew across the keys, and his voice was full of energy. When he arrived in the 1950s, he changed music forever. His hit song, "Whole Lotta Shakin' Goin' On," was exciting, but Great Balls of Fire made him a legend. He pounded the piano, shouted his lyrics, and acted like the music had taken over his body. He even kicked over his piano bench, set instruments on fire, and made crowds go crazy. People couldn't look away from his wild performances. He became one of rock's biggest stars, but his success didn't last. In 1958, a shocking secret came out. He had married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. The world turned against him. Radio stations stopped playing his songs, concerts were canceled, and he lost his fame almost overnight. He kept playing music, trying to make a comeback, but the scandal followed him everywhere. Even when he started gaining success again, he never reached the top like before. Instead of giving up, he changed his style. In the 1960s, he turned to country music. His songs, "Would You Take Another Chance," "On Me," and "She Even Woke Me Up to Say Goodbye," helped him find a new audience. Some people still judged him, but others never stopped loving his music. He kept performing for as long as he could, holding onto the stage like it was his lifeline. Fans still came to see him, remembering the fire he once was. Before Elvis Presley became famous, and before Chuck Berry wowed crowds, Bill Haley was there. His song, "Rock Around the Clock," wasn't just popular, it changed music forever. When it hit the top of the charts in 1955, rock and roll had arrived. It played in movies, on TV, and in jukeboxes everywhere. Teens loved it, dancing and feeling free in a way they never had before. It became the sound of rebellion, the beginning of something new. Bill Haley wasn't wild or dangerous like later rock stars. He was different. As new musicians like Little Richard and Buddy Holly became popular, Bill Haley started to fade. America moved on, but his music was still loved in Europe and Latin America. Over time, though, things got harder for him. He had money problems and turned to alcohol. The rock world he had helped create was leaving him behind. By 1981, Bill Haley was gone. He died at just 55 years old, struggling with health problems. His name slowly disappeared from history. Other stars took the spotlight, but without him, would rock and roll have ever happened? His music laid the foundation for everything that came after. Rock Around the Clock is still played today, reminding us of the man who helped start it all. Before AC/DC, Scott's life was messy. He worked different jobs and played in small bands. Nothing seemed to last. Then, in 1974, he joined AC/DC. The band was young and ready to take over the world. With Scott as their leader, their music became unstoppable. Songs like "Highway to Hell," "TNT," and "Let There Be Rock" became more than just songs. They became anthems. His lyrics were funny, risky, and full of adventure. He spoke to people who wanted to break free. But even the strongest flames burn out. One night in February 1980, Scott drank too much and never woke up. He was found in a parked car, silent and still. The cause was alcohol poisoning. It was a sad and lonely end for someone so full of life. His death shocked the world. Fans and bandmates couldn't believe he was gone. His voice had made history, and now it was silent. AC/DC could have stopped there, but they didn't. Instead, they honored Scott by releasing Back in Black, one of the greatest rock albums ever. Scott may have been gone, but his spirit lived on. His voice still echoes in rock music today. And so we ask, do rock legends ever really die, or do they live forever in their songs? 4. Brian Jones. More than just a member of the Rolling Stones, Brian Jones was their creator, the one who built their sound. In the early 1960s, he brought the band together. He loved the blues and wanted to bring that style into rock music. He played many instruments, sitar, marimba, and mellotron, giving their music a unique sound. He was not just a musician, but an explorer, always pushing rock in new directions. But as the band got bigger, Jones lost control. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards became the leaders, and he was left behind. He struggled with addiction, and his mind became cloudy. In June 1969, he was forced to leave the band. Just a few weeks later, he was gone. On a summer night in July, Brian Jones was found at the bottom of his swimming pool. The official report called it an accident, death by misadventure, but rumors still spread. Some people believe there was something darker behind his death. Witnesses gave different stories, and some think his life was taken. Did he simply lose control, or was there a hidden truth behind his death? 5. Eddie Cochran. A rock and roll rebel, Eddie Cochran had slick hair, a cool attitude, and amazing guitar skills. His music was full of energy, and he helped shape the sound of rockabilly. He mixed loud, powerful sounds with catchy melodies, making songs that people still love today. His hit song, Summertime Blues, spoke to teenagers who felt unheard, and his voice carried the spirit of rebellion. Cochran wasn't just a singer. He was an innovator. He experimented with new recording techniques, like overdubbing and multi-track recording, long before they became common. His rough electric guitar style influenced legends like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Jimi Hendrix. Every time he performed, he had a confidence that made him unforgettable. He seemed like he was destined to be a major star. But in April 1960, his journey ended too soon. While touring in England, Eddie Cochran was in a terrible car crash. The taxi he was in lost control, and he was badly hurt. He was only 21 when he passed away. Though his career was short, his impact on music was huge. 6. Bo Diddley. More than just a musician, Bo Diddley was a game changer. His style was bold, and his music was unlike anything before. He was called the originator because he created a new sound. His famous beat, a strong, steady rhythm, became a foundation for rock and pop music. Without him, rock and roll would sound very different. In the 1950s, his first song, Bo Diddley, shocked the world with its raw energy. He made his own guitars, used distortion before it was popular, and set new trends in music. His music inspired bands like the Rolling Stones, U2, and Bruce Springsteen. His confidence and unique stage presence made him stand out, especially his rectangle-shaped guitar, which was one of a kind. Despite his huge influence, Bo Diddley never got the fame or credit he deserved. Many artists copied his style and made millions, while he struggled to get the same recognition. He spoke out about the unfair music industry, but few listened. Still, he kept playing and creating. His music was full of attitude and energy, shaping the future of rock and roll. 7. Ritchie Valens. A bright star in rock and roll, Ritchie Valens had a short time but left a lasting impact. His music still lives on, loved by many people. His story is both inspiring and heartbreaking. Born Richard Stephen Valenzuela in California, he grew up with music all around him. His family loved mariachi music, and he mixed that sound with rock. He learned to play the guitar as a young boy and became very talented. Soon, people started to notice him. In 1958, Delphi Records signed him to make music. His first hit, Come On Let's Go, was full of energy and excitement. But Donna and La Bamba made him a legend. La Bamba was special because it mixed Mexican folk music with rock, showing that music has no boundaries. His success proved that Latino musicians could shine in rock and roll, a genre mostly led by others at the time. His music was fresh, exciting, and made people dance. But tragedy struck. On February 3, 1959, Ritchie Valens was on a plane with Buddy Holly and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson. The plane crashed, taking the lives of them all. It was a sad day, later called the day the music died. He was only 17 years old. He had so much talent and potential, but his life was cut short. Even though he was young, his music never faded. New generations still listen to his songs, and musicians continue to be inspired by him. He may be gone, but his legacy remains strong. 8. Gene Vincent. Not just a musician, Gene Vincent was a force of nature. He had a wild sound, a rebellious attitude, and a style that made him unforgettable. Born Vincent Eugene Craddock in Norfolk, Virginia, he loved music from a young age. But his life changed after a terrible motorcycle accident. His leg was badly injured, and he was in pain for the rest of his life. However, he did not let that stop him. Instead, he turned his pain into power. In 1956, he released Be-Bop-A-Lula, a song full of energy and attitude. Fans loved it. He performed in black leather, with a tough look and a voice that was raw and full of emotion. His music was different, gritty, real, and full of passion. He became an icon, especially in England, where musicians like the Beatles and Jeff Beck admired him. He was the original bad boy of rock, paving the way for future rock stars. But Gene's life was full of struggles. In 1960, his close friend Eddie Cochran died in a car crash while Gene Vincent was in the same vehicle. The accident left him deeply hurt, both physically and emotionally. As rockabilly music faded, so did his fame. Health problems and money troubles followed him for the rest of his life. In 1971, he passed away from a ruptured ulcer, leaving behind a legacy of raw, powerful music. 9. Link Wray. Some musicians change music with their voices. Others do it with their instruments. Link Wray did both, but without words. He let his guitar do the talking, and what it said shook the world. Born Fred Lincoln Ray Jr., he had Native American roots and a love for music. He first played country, but rock and roll set his soul on fire. His style was loud, rough, and full of energy. Every note he played felt wild and free, like something you couldn't control. Then came Rumble, a song with no lyrics but full of power. It was banned in some states because people thought it could cause trouble. Just one song, yet it scared people. That was the power of Ray. He created the power chord, the sound that would later define hard rock and heavy metal. He also played with distortion and feedback, turning his guitar into something fierce and unpredictable. His music felt like an earthquake, shaking the ground of rock history. Big names like Pete Townshend, Jimmy Page, and Iggy Pop looked up to him. His music inspired many, yet he never became truly famous. The industry didn't give him the credit he deserved. He was loved by musicians, but mostly unknown to the general public. As years passed, he faded from the spotlight. He passed away in 2005, never fully recognized for his influence. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ignored him while he was alive, but his impact lives on. Every time a guitarist blasts a powerful distorted chord, they owe something to Link Wray. 10. Del Shannon. A storyteller with an unforgettable voice, Del Shannon was born Charles Whedon Westover in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He loved music from an early age, drawn to rhythm and blues and country, but he found his place in rock and roll. In 1961, the world heard his biggest song, Runaway. It was unlike anything before. The strange, high-pitched sound of the Musitron keyboard gave it a haunting feel. The song told a sad story of lost love, and millions of people connected with it. At that moment, he was unstoppable. But music changed. British rock bands took over, and many early rockers faded. Shannon didn't give up. He kept experimenting and even covered the Beatles before most American artists dared to. He worked with legends like Jeff Lynne and Tom Petty, always pushing his sound forward. But behind the scenes, he struggled. Fame can be heavy, and for him, it was too much. In February 1990, Del Shannon took his own life at 55 years old. His death was a tragic loss for music. He was later inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but the question remains, what more could he have given if life had been kinder to him? 11. David Johansen. Rock music is about breaking rules, and David Johansen did just that. He was more than a singer. He was energy, wild and loud. As the leader of the New York Dolls, he mixed punk's rough edge with glam's flashy style. His voice was sharp, and his stage presence was electric. The Dolls were not made for the mainstream, but their influence spread far. You can hear their style in punk and hard rock bands that followed. When the Dolls broke up in the late 1970s, Johansen did not disappear. He changed. Under the name Buster Poindexter, he became a lounge singer with a fun, over-the-top act. His song, Hot, 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 became famous, which was surprising since he came from the underground music scene. Fame did not last forever, but Johansen kept going. He acted in movies and appeared on TV. His love for music never faded. But in February 2025, at the age of 75, his time ran out. Illness took him, something his wild years never could. 12. Phil Lesh. A bass guitar is often the steady beat of a band, but Phil Lesh made it something more. His bass lines moved like a voice, shaping the music of the Grateful Dead. Born in Berkeley, California, he thought like a composer and played like a dreamer. He was never meant to make simple music. Lesh joined the Grateful Dead in 1965 and became a key part of their unique sound. The band did not just play songs, they created musical journeys. Their long jams felt like adventures, and Lesh's bass was always leading the way. He did not just play notes, he told stories through his music. Many of his bandmates passed away before him. He faced serious health problems, but he kept playing. Even after the Grateful Dead ended, he continued, helping new musicians and running his music venue, Terrapin Crossroads. He never stopped believing in the magic of music. But no one can play forever. In October 2024, at 84 years old, he passed away. The world lost not just a musician, but a creator of sound, a man who turned music into something bigger than just songs. 13. Garth Hudson. Some musicians love the spotlight. Others stay in the background, shaping the sound without seeking attention. Hudson was one of the latter. He was a quiet genius who helped create music that still touches people today. Born in Windsor, Canada, Hudson loved two kinds of music, the careful beauty of classical and the wild energy of rock and jazz. He didn't chase fame. Instead, he explored sound, becoming a master of the keyboard. With his fingers, he could make a single instrument sound like an entire orchestra. As a key member of the band, Hudson's music was magic. The eerie organ intro of Chest Fever was his masterpiece, like a dream, strange yet beautiful. His gentle touch on I Shall Be Released made the song feel like a prayer. Even though he was brilliant, he stayed in the shadows, letting others take the spotlight. Later in life, he faced struggles. Many forgot his contributions to rock music. On a cold January night in 2025, his hands played their last note. His passing was quiet, like the way he had lived, but his music remains, waiting for those who truly listen. 14. Paul Di'Anno. Some voices don't just sing, they strike like lightning. Paul Di'Anno had one of those voices. He was the wild force behind Iron Maiden's early sound. Before the soaring vocals of later years, there was Di'Anno, raw, fierce, and full of attitude. Born in East London, he brought the spirit of punk into heavy metal. His voice was rough and powerful, filled with energy. He only recorded 2 albums with Iron Maiden, but those albums shaped metal music. Phantom of the Opera was a battle cry, Wrathchild a shout of rebellion. His singing was perfect for restless souls, but his fire burned too hot. The rock and roll lifestyle pulled him down. Soon he was out of the band, and Iron Maiden moved on. Di'Anno struggled, trying to find his place again. In his later years, his health declined, his body growing weaker over time. On an October night in 2024, his voice was silenced forever. News of his passing was quiet, unlike the loud and wild life he had lived. But his music still lives in those early albums, waiting for new ears to discover the fire he once had. 15. Duane Eddy. Some musicians play the guitar. Others change the way it sounds forever. Duane Eddy was one of those rare players. His guitar didn't just make music. It growled, echoed, and shook the world. He called his sound twang, a deep and bold tone that no one had ever heard before. It became his signature, something that made his music unforgettable. Born in Corning, New York, Eddie picked up a guitar when he was young. He didn't just play it. He made it speak. His first big song, Rebel Rouser, was more than just a hit. It was an explosion of sound, a tune that made people stop and listen. Other songs like Peter Gunn and 40 Miles of Bad Road had the same powerful effect. His music didn't need words. His guitar did all the talking. Eddie became a legend, but music changes over time. The world moved on, and instrumental rock was no longer popular. Still, he never stopped playing. His hands remembered the twang, the sound that made him famous. Then, in March 2024, his guitar went quiet forever. The news didn't make a big splash, but those who knew his music understood. His sound, his twang, still lives on, waiting for someone to pick up a guitar and bring it back to life. 16. Joey Molland. Some bands are famous for their songs. Others are remembered for their struggle. Badfinger had both. Joey Molland was the last surviving member of Badfinger, a band with both great talent and great misfortune. Born in Liverpool, the same city as the Beatles, he grew up surrounded by music. He joined Badfinger in the late 1960s, just as the band was about to become huge. They had big hits. No Matter What, Day After Day, Baby Blue. These songs could have made them one of the biggest bands in history. But instead of success, they found problems. Their money disappeared, their contracts were unfair, and life became a battle. The pressure became too much, and two of their members, Pete Ham and Tom Evans, took their own lives. Molland kept going. He never gave up on the music, playing Badfinger's songs and keeping their memory alive. But time never stops. In March 2025, Joey Molland passed away. With him, the last part of Badfinger's tragic story came to an end. But their songs still play, their music still drifts through the air, refusing to be forgotten. 17. Scott Kempner. The Dictator's sound influenced future punk bands like the Ramones and the Clash. Kempner's guitar style left a lasting mark on rock music. In the 1980s, he formed the Del Lords, a band that mixed rock with Americana, showing that he was more than just a punk guitarist. Even though he played a big role in music, Kempner never became famous. Sadly, he was diagnosed with early-onset dementia and retired in 2021. He passed away on November 29, 2023, at the age of 69. While many people may not know his name, his impact on punk rock will never be forgotten. 18. Jerry Miller, an incredible guitarist whose music helped shape psychedelic rock. Jerry Miller was born on July 10, 1943, and grew up listening to blues and rockabilly. By the 1960s, he had joined San Francisco's music scene and co-founded the band Moby Grape. Moby Grape's first album became a classic, mixing strong harmonies with powerful guitar playing. Miller's skill was a key part of the band's unique sound. While bands like the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane became famous, Moby Grape struggled with bad management and other problems, keeping them from reaching the same level of success. Even though his band did not become a household name, Miller was recognized as one of the best guitarists of all time by Rolling Stone magazine. He continued playing music for many years, inspiring new generations of musicians. On March 6, 2024, he passed away at the age of 80. Though his death did not make big headlines, those who knew rock music understood that a true legend was gone. 19. Alan Merrill. A story about fame, but not the kind everyone knows. Alan Merrill was born in the Bronx on February 19, 1951, and grew up in a family that loved music. While most rock musicians wanted to be famous in the United States, he found success in Japan in the early 1970s. His biggest moment came in 1975 when he co-wrote the song I Love Rock and Roll. His band, Arrows, recorded the first version. It was slower and had a bluesy feel. Later, Joan Jett made the song famous with her fast and powerful version. Even though Merrill wrote it, his name was often forgotten. He never stopped making music. even though people mostly remembered him for that one song. Sadly, on March 29, 2020, Alan Merrill died from COVID-19. His passing was a reminder that some of the most important musicians don't always get the credit they deserve. Hawkins had his own hit songs like Mary Lou and Who Do You Love, but his real talent was finding and helping new musicians. His band, the Hawks, was full of talented artists. Some of them, like Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm, went on to form The Band, one of the most famous rock groups in history. Thanks to his guidance, they learned the skills they needed to change rock music forever. Even though he was never a worldwide superstar, musicians respected him for what he did. He stayed active in music for decades and always had a big personality. On May 29, 2022, Ronnie Hawkins passed away at the age of 87 after a long illness. His legacy wasn't in the number of hit songs he had, but in the great musicians he helped create. Many early British rock musicians copied American rock and roll, but Kid and his band, the Pirates, did something different. They mixed blues with fast, sharp rhythms to create a new, powerful sound. Their look was also unique. He dressed like a pirate and wore an eye patch, making him stand out in the dark clubs where they played. In 1960, Johnny Kidd released his most famous song, Shakin' All Over. The deep, spooky guitar riff played by Joe Moretti sent chills down listeners' spines. His mysterious voice made the song unforgettable. Later, the famous band The Who performed it in front of huge crowds. But even though the song became a hit, his time in the spotlight was short. As British rock grew, he was left behind. On October 7, 1966, Kid's life ended suddenly in a car crash. He never got to see how British rock took over the world. His name became less known, but his influence never faded. Many wonder what more he could have created if he had lived. 22. Arthur Alexander. Some musicians become famous, while others create great music but remain in the shadows. Arthur Alexander was one of those hidden legends. Born on May 10, 1940, in Sheffield, Alabama, he had a special talent. He mixed the deep emotions of country music with the energy of rhythm and blues, creating songs full of feeling. Alexander was one of the first artists to record at Fame Studios, where the famous Muscle Shoals sound began. His voice was filled with honesty and emotion. In 1961, he released You Better Move On, which later became a hit for the Rolling Stones. His song, Anna, Go to Him, was performed by the Beatles. His music also influenced Elvis Presley, Bob Dylan, and Otis Redding. While his songs became popular, his own name was often forgotten. As time passed, Alexander faded from the music scene. By the late 1970s, he stopped making music and took a job as a bus driver. It seemed like the world had moved on without him, but in the early 1990s, his music was rediscovered, and he made a comeback. He recorded a new album, Lonely Just Like Me, proving his talent was still strong. Sadly, just days after his return, on June 9, 1993, Alexander passed away from heart failure. He was gone, but his songs remain. Even though many people don't know his name, his music shaped rock and soul in ways that can never be forgotten. 23. Brian James. A musician who helped start punk rock, Brian James was born on February 18, 1949, in Hammersmith, London. He wanted music to be raw and simple. He didn't follow the old rock rules, he broke them. Before punk had a name, he was already making it. Brian formed a band called London SS, where future punk stars got their start. In 1976, he co-founded The Damned, one of the first punk bands in the UK. Their song New Rose came out before the Pistols' Anarchy in the UK, making history. The Damned's first album, Damned, 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 was fast and loud, exactly what punk needed. Brian created the band's rough sound, but punk was wild, and so was the band. In 1978, he left The Damned and played in other bands, never stopping, but never as famous again. He lived to see punk change and grow. He saw it become part of the mainstream, but real punk never dies. On March 7, 2025, Brian James passed away, but his music still inspires those who love rebellion and raw sound. 24. Slim Dunlap. Born on August 14, 1951, in Plainview, Minnesota, Bob Slim Dunlap loved music, but he didn't chase fame. He just wanted to play guitar. He played in local clubs in Minneapolis and became known for his deep, bluesy style. In 1987, he joined the Replacements, replacing their first guitarist, Bob Stinson. The band was changing from wild punk energy to a more thoughtful sound. Slim's bluesy style helped shape their last albums, Don't Tell a Soul and All Shook Down. After the Replacements broke up in 1991, he played solo and released albums like The Old New Me and Times Like This. His music was warm and emotional, but in 2012 he had a severe stroke that left him unable to play. Musicians came together to raise money for him, showing their love for his quiet but important impact. Known as Herbie, Brian Keith Flowers was born on May 19, 1938, in Isleworth, Middlesex. He started as a tuba player in the Royal Air Force before switching to bass guitar. His strong sense of rhythm made him one of the best session musicians in rock history. By the 1960s, he was playing on hit songs. One of his most famous bass lines was in Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side. He played both an upright and an electric bass to make that unique sound. Even though the song became legendary, he was only paid a small session fee. Herbie played with many stars. He worked with David Bowie on Space Oddity, played for Elton John's Tumbleweed Connection, and helped shape Harry Nilsson's Jump into the Fire. He also formed bands like Blue Mink and Sky, showing his range of talent.